Healing through storytelling. How do you know if your story is worth sharing? This was a question once posed to me. I answered with the following: because you exist. Because every story is worth sharing. Because sharing takes courage. Because sharing is healing. As I was preparing for my talk, I kept asking myself, how many layers of myself will I be peeling off in front of you today? It took me years to meticulously build myself up to the woman you see today. Sharing your story is vulnerable. It's scary because you're being judged, and you carry shame. But in front of you today, I will be sharing my story, a story of how I took my silence and my shame, and I transformed it into transparency and empathy. As I'm talking about shame throughout my story, I have the definition of shame by Brené Brown. Shame is an intensely painful feeling or an experience of believing that you are somewhat flawed and unworthy. Have you ever wondered how many survivors walk amongst us, burdened with fear that our shame can be displayed on our faces? So we compensate with superficial smiles to ensure that our family name remains protected. Like many of you, I grew up in an extended family, grandparents, uncles and aunts. I was raised in a small town with a large Punjabi population, very much agricultural based, and people often call it the Pend. In my childhood, we were often told, "Chup. Chup hoke roti kha. Chup hoke sau ja. Chup hoke kam kar." Who can relate to that? Yeah. It's comedic in a way, but it's a reflection of how culturally we're silenced from such a young age. I also had a best friend growing up. She was also Punjabi. We shared everything with one another. Spent all day at school, came home, talked on the phone. We thought we knew everything. But there was one thing that neither one of us shared. And that was that both of our fathers were alcoholics. It's one of those unwritten rules in our community that we don't speak about these kind of issues outside of our home. I would wake up in the morning, smile on my face, go to school. Nobody would know the pain and the hurting and the fear that I was carrying, because that was my way of coping. And don't get me wrong, I actually had an amazing childhood, and my father is a wonderful, loving man. But it took me years to separate the man with the addiction and my father. I've learned that my father is a man who crossed oceans to a land so foreign, the only English word he spoke was survival. Men like him have been conditioned to also stay silent. So he suppresses his emotions, drinks, numbs away the pain. Fast forward a few years, and I complete my bachelor's degree in social work. I'm armed with 4 years of knowledge, and I want to give back to my own community. But what do you think I was faced with? Were they excited to see me? Were they excited to have a Punjabi girl working in the community? No. I was met with resistance, denial, and silence. I worked in child protection, so sometimes I would have a police report in my hand. I would see bruising on women's faces, yet they would still say, "Sade ghar nahi hunda." I was torn for many reasons. One, I felt hopeless, but two, I felt like a fraud because some of these things were going on in my family, were going on within members of my family, whether it was the addiction, whether it was domestic violence, mental health, or sexual abuse. A few years ago, I had a woman phone me to tell me after years of dealing with abuse from her husband, she finally left. She called the police on him. What do you think his family did? Do you think they supported her decision? No. They were blackmailing her, trying to force her to recant her story. What is that? That is victim blaming. That is shaming her, telling her that she's the problem, that she shouldn't have been talking. She should not have been standing up for herself, to endure it all. So then I question, whose honor, whose izzat are we protecting? I spoke to my mom about this recently. In the last few years, her and I have really been opening up about the experiences she had. And this was inspired by her. This world has shattered me whole, but here I am. Don't ask me how I haven't turned into broken bones. I am a survivor. During that time when I was working in social work, feeling hopeless, I decided to run away from all my problems. So, naturally, I quit my job. I opened up a map on Google, closed my eyes, and picked a country. So, I went to Peru, spent some time there, worked there. Eventually, after about a year, I came back. I had changed. I had finally grown into the woman I wanted to be. I was growing in a way that I wasn't being oppressed by my community, which is how I saw it. When I came back, I realized that everything around me was still the same. And I couldn't have those superficial conversations any longer. So, during the time when I was starting to doubt my voice, I created She Writes HerStory. I started to share my experiences through poetry, through stories, and then I started sharing other women's stories as well. And that is how my platform was created, to empower other women to share their stories, because we're not alone in our experiences. We might feel alone, but we're not alone. It's fairly long, but I wanted to share one of the messages I recently received from a reader. I'm a survivor of childhood sexual abuse. Seeing the engagement on your page warms my heart. For over 20 years, I said nothing. I was living in my own hell. She also has a story. And now she wants to share her story as well, to inspire other women who are going through what she's going through. And that is what I want to leave you here with today, that no one can tell our stories for us. We talk about being revolutionaries, but there is a divide right now in our community, in our culture. How do we unite and become equals again? I believe it starts with recognizing some of the issues that we do have in our community, and we need to start talking about them to make a difference. Thank you so much to the OSA for inviting me back here. It is because I started to share my story is that I've now had the privilege to stand here in front of you in the nation's capital. Vaheguru Ji Ka Khalsa, Vaheguru Ji Ki Fateh.